two liquid oxygen converters that are connected in parallel to a common distribution manifold. That manifold, it has isolation and check valves that prevent a loss of pressure due to faults in either of the converters. And it's also important to know that there are no provisions to isolate one compartment or outlet from the common manifold. So all of the oxygen goes through to all the compartments. Those converters, they have 25 and 75 liter capacity, and they're located on the left main landing gear pod fairing between the two main bogies. We have a liquid oxygen supply manual shutoff valve that's mounted in the airplane pressure skin in the oxygen converter compartment where we service oxygen. And there's also another one on it's a valve hand wheel in the cargo compartment that we can use for flight access. And it's safety wired to the open position. After that common manifold, the oxygen passes through 4 heat exchangers, and as a result, it provides breathed air within 20 degrees Fahrenheit of the cargo compartment temperature. And those are the 2 valves there. Along the lines of oxygen servicing, just wanted to add in the 2C5 Ball 3, it says simultaneous fuel and oxygen servicing are not authorized. That could be dangerous because oxygen is flammable. More with the oxygen system on the inside, on the flight engineers panel, we have the liquid oxygen quantity indicators. There's 2 test switches. They're both in the middle there. When depressed, the needles on the quantity gauges will fall until the quantity low lights to either side of the test buttons are illuminated. And those come on when there's approximately 10% of the converter capacity remaining. So at 2.5 and 7.5 liters, those should come on. And the flight engineer tests those before flight. Also, the flight crew receives oxygen from two branches off of the supply line from the manifold, and they go to the left and right side. Those branches provide oxygen to the oxygen regulators as well as the recharge stations. There's 11 regulators total. They are the ops limit for that static no flow 275 to 450 and stabilized 275 to 400 PSIG. Usually it's the flight engineer that will check that in the pre-flight. But like I said, there's 11 flight crew oxygen regulators. There's one for the pilot, the observer, the co-pilot, the navigator, and the flight engineer station, as well as six more for each bunk in the crew relief compartment between the 2 compartments. Looking at the regulator itself, we have the flow indicator on the top left of the oxygen regulator. On the right side is the oxygen supply pressure gauge. And the bottom right switch, that's the oxygen supply lever that just turns the oxygen regulator on and off, as we know. Next is the diluter lever. It provides 100% pure oxygen. And when it's in the normal position, it provides a dilution that provides oxygen at normal body levels. And lastly, we have the emergency toggle lever. In the emergency position, it provides continuous positive pressure. In the normal position, the regulator regulates automatically controlled pressure for us. And in the test position, it'll give positive pressure at any altitude to test the fit of a mask. And there I included the warning. The emergency toggle lever should remain in the normal position, except when unscheduled pressure is required. Next, on to the oxygen warning system. So the oxygen warning system is activated when the cabin altitude is from 12,500 to 14,000 feet. When that happens, there's a couple things that are initiated. First, the oxygen mask storage container doors all open in the aft flight deck and the troop compartment and the mask wall. When that happens, oxygen flows to the mask through lanyard-operated valves that are opened by pulling the mask towards your face. That's why they say on airplanes, you pull the mask to engage the flow of oxygen that allows it to pass through the mask to the user. Also, you get the oxygen on light on the continuous flow regulator panel. That's the picture on the bottom right. the oxygen on light comes on. That's why when you see the Loadmaster, this panel is located across from the table in the aft deck next to that coat closet. When it's moved to the test position, it tests all of these conditions, and they'll get that oxygen light on as well. When they do that test, they also turn the lights to dim because you should also get all of the white dome lights to come on bright in the aft flight deck, courier compartment, cargo compartment, and chute compartment. And of course, the warning horn sounds, and that can be silenced by the oxygen warning silence push button. That's located on the co-pilot side of the pilot's overhead panel. The oxygen system is depressurized again when the cabin altitude returns below 11,500 feet, and all of the changes that happen return to the previous condition prior to activation, with the exception of the storage container doors. Those will stay open. Here, I also wanted to add the cabin press low warning that we get, just to make sure there's not any confusion with that. We get that when the cabin altitude exceeds 10,000 feet, and that's where our loss of pressurization boldface comes in. Oxygen on, 100% co-pilot, pilot, engineer. More with the flight crew oxygen system, we have 16 MA1 portable oxygen bottles. Here I have the numbers for how many are where. For us, the nearest ones closest to us, we have forward of the navigator table, the flight engineer table. We have one across from the flight crew entrance ladder. It's called in the emergency equipment access area. That's just right across the aisle from the ladder when you come up. We have one in between the bunks in the flight deck and across from that table in the recessed cubby near where the oxygen test panel is. And then we also have one in the laboratory. In the troop compartment, there are two in the aft right troop compartment near the troop load masters, and there are one in each laboratory as well. And we have 6 in the cargo compartment. They're located in the forward, mid, and aft, and they're on either side, 6 of them. The 16 MA1 oxygen bottles, they're normally serviced to 300 PSI by the oxygen system, and they are redlined at 450 PSI. On those bottles, they have altitude selected positions. They're normal, 30M, 42M, and emergency. So in the normal position, it provides pressure on demand, and that is up to 30,000 feet. Then the 30M position, that's 30,000 to 42,000 feet, and so on, with emergency being over 45,000. And each one also gives increasing pressure when it's moved to that position. I have those numbers there. The way I was kind of thinking about this, any circumstance where maybe we would need to help the scanner or load masters, maybe fight a fire or investigate a leak or something like that while we're in the observer seat, you're likely to only use the normal position. I try to think of a scenario maybe if we had a fire and we're still pressurized, we're certainly not going to have a cabin altitude above 30,000 feet. And if we do experience a rapid decompression or a decompression in general, our immediate actions would be to descend to a safe altitude. And by the time that we are depressurized and it's safe for people to walk around and get on the portable oxygen bottles, we're definitely going to want to be way below 30,000 feet as well. I think most cases we can expect to have that bottle in normal or any crew member. We also have 10 oxygen bottle recharger outlets. Near us, we have right next to the nav bottle, the flight engineer bottle, and then right across from the crew entrance ladder as well. And further back, we have one across from the table up front in the aft flight deck. In the cargo compartment, we have 3. They're once again in the forward, mid, and aft cargo compartment, and they're alternating sides, left, right, left. And both of the there's a recharger outlet in the troop compartment right next to the troop flight engineer or the troop load masters, next to those 2 bottles, and one outside of the labs. Along these lines, the 2C5 Vol 3 talks about the 3 types of portable oxygen bottle refill valves that we have. There's 3 different refill valves on various oxygen bottles. They are unmodified, modified, and modified 2. The first and last type, they can refill the oxygen bottles in 30 to 45 seconds. However, the modified bottles can take as much as 3.5 minutes to refill that bottle. And they have a note in the Vol 3 that says it's possible for the bottles to deplete faster than they can be refilled. And both of these, this slide and the last slide, I included the portable oxygen bottle duration schedule here, just to kind of give us an idea of how that can affect us. So for example, at 18,000 feet in the normal position, at the moderate activity range, you can expect anywhere from 4.8 to 9.2 minutes of oxygen. However, heavy activity is 2.4 minutes of oxygen. So not very much. Like it says, if you have just a normal modified bottle, you can use up all your oxygen before you actually get a chance to refill it properly. So if you're going up and down stairs or the ladder, that can cause issues. Things for us to consider. The MEL specifies how many unmodified and modified 2 bottles that we need. It says 4 for the A column or main operating base. And for B bases, it is possible for us to depart without the 4 required. However, they must be replaced at the next repair capable facility. Lastly, with the emergency equipment for oxygen, we have 8 PBEs and 88 EPAWs devices. They're both hoods that we can use. The PBEs, they have 15 minutes of oxygen, or what they provide. They will make a noise when they are activated, and it says that when that noise stops for the PBEs, you need to remove the hood. There's also a note there that it can generate heat when used, so you want to be careful not to burn yourself. For the EPAWs, we have 88 of them, 73 in the troop compartment, and 15 more in the aft flight deck. For both of these devices, the max operating altitude is actually 41,000 feet. I'll be sure to put that on the other one. But it says it provides 5 to 60 minutes of oxygen, and that depends on the user's body weight and activity level. For that, it will make a noise as well. It says for the first 15 minutes, but after that, it'll stop making the noise, and you know to remove the hood when the hood collapses on your face. That's when you want to take it off. And other notes for these, you just want to make sure the clothing and hair are out of the way of the neck seal to provide a good seal for use. Then on to oxygen and pressurization requirements. So in the 202 Vol 3, it says that aircrew will normally use supplemental oxygen when the cabin altitude exceeds 10,000 feet. But it does have provisions for when you're not on supplemental oxygen. Without supplemental oxygen, you're limited to 14,000 feet. Above that, you need oxygen. 10,000 to 12,500 feet we have unlimited use there. However, there is a 1-hour limit if you are in IMC at night, employing weapons, conducting airdrop, air refueling, or during high G maneuvering. From 12,500 to 14,000 feet, you're limited to 30 minutes without supplemental oxygen. And also, it says that occupants that are not trained in accordance with the 11403 are limited to 13,000 feet and 3 hours, as well as the other limitations listed above. And for unpressurized flight, do not remain above flight level 250, and they prefer that you get below 18,000 feet when unpressurized. And if the cabin altitude exceeds 18,000 feet due to a unplanned depressurization, aircrew and passengers must be evaluated by a flight surgeon prior to the next departure. On the slide, I included the oxygen requirements table from the 202 Vol 3. That's where we get our above flight level 350. One pilot is required to have oxygen on and the other oxygen available. And if you look at that, it talks about when you need a partial pressure suit and then a full pressure suit as well, and other things. Also in the 202 Vol 3 AMC sub, it has our depressurization requirements for fuel and oxygen planning. So for fuel requirements, it says that fuel should be planned for recovery depressurized at 10,000 or 18,000 feet. For the CFPs that we'll get from TACC, they're planned for us to recover at 18,000 feet depressurized. That's why I have that underlined here. And it's very important for us to understand that depressurized recovery fuel is only planned for us to land with 30 minutes of reserve fuel, and that's max endurance at 10,000 feet. So most days on missions, 30 minutes of reserve fuel is only going to be like 8,000, 9,000 pounds, not a whole lot. So that's just an important consideration for us to have, because it would be not a comfortable day. The 2C5 Vol 3 also says that the PIC must ensure sufficient oxygen from ETP to recovery. I know that 202 Vol 3 also says that. So, and it also tells us how to do that using the Vol 1 or the Dash 1. So it says calculate up to 5 crew members using crew regulators on 100%. And the remaining crew and passengers, you want passengers on continuous flow. So on the next page, this is the last slide, I have an example of that, how we would apply it. For this example, I tried to use a worst case scenario from what I've seen. So I know from Hickam to Guam or vice versa, I've seen depressurized flight times from the ETP of 4.5 hours. So I rounded up to 5 just to give like the very like worst case scenario we could imagine. It might be a little bit on the conservative side, but looking at, like it says, 5 crew members for the top. Here's the reference for that as well. It's in the Dash 1 on 1-998, but you'll use the second 2 charts. So 5 crew members go over to your 18,000 feet. That's 2.2 liters per hour. And then passengers continuous flow. This is planned for a crew of 12, so a decent sized crew, and a full troop compartment, 73. So that's 80 people total at 18,000 feet. That's 11.5 liters per hour. You multiply that by the 5-hour depressurized flight time, I got 68.5 liters of oxygen. So for me, like a quick check, when we come up the ladder, when we first get to the plane and we look at the flight engineer's panel, see how much fuel we have on board, you can take a quick glance at the oxygen quantity indicator gauges, add them together. If you have more than 70 liters of oxygen, you know that you should be good on oxygen for even the worst case scenario. I know some people use other numbers, maybe more reasonable numbers, but if you have some of those techniques, please let us know. But with that, that's all I have on the oxygen system. Does anyone have other things to add or some things that I should add to the brief?
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of feedback.
Let me try to mute that.
Okay, nice. So yeah, we were just talking about checking oxygen on board before you take off. So I'll just talk a little bit about a scenario we had where we had enough oxygen when we took off, and then we had developed a converter leak in the air. So this was on, I don't think Mark's on here. Is he flying? Anyway, this was on Mark's OME a little over a year ago. So we were flying from McCord to Ramstein, and like you had talked about, we got on board, we did the oxygen check, everything looked good. We had enough, I think we had like 30 packs in the back or something like that. And so everything looked good. We took off, and then we got up over northern Canada, and the converters, the engineers pointed out that our converters had started leaking. So the math that we had to do there was, okay, if we get out, over the ocean or something, and we do experience a rapid D, do we have enough? Like what is our oxygen situation going to look like if this leak continues? So what we ended up doing was like you said, most of our ETPs are planned at 18,000. So we made sure that we could get below 10,000 feet at our ETP and still have enough gas to make it to our first suitable airfield. And then, basically saying, okay, we'll only need the oxygen for the emergency descent portion, and that'll be enough oxygen to get us down below an altitude where we don't need to be on oxygen anymore. There's Mark right there. What's up? Yeah, and Mark, feel free to jump in if I missed anything. But so just something to think about. We always sit and talk about like the mission planning portion of the oxygen equation, but it's something to think about when you're flying along. Right, what happens if I have a leak? How am I going to ensure that I have enough oxygen to continue, or do I need to turn around or divert right now?
And that we left with completely full out of Travis, but the 75 or it was, that one was leaking and we ended up draining it. So we were down to the 25 and we had to do the math. Like, all right, how long of a flight it is it? How many packs do we have? And had to tell the user, like, all right, this is how many packs we can take. I think we were able to take everybody at the end of the day, but that was going to be an interesting conversation if that one had to happen. And it was, 75 leaked on the way to McCord and we drained it there. And then the 25 on the way to, over northern Canada, it was like a 12, I think. We needed, I think we did the math, taking off out of McCord, we needed 21, and we had like 23 in the 25. And then over northern Canada, it was like at like 13-ish, and then we did the quick math there on what we needed to get to somewhere, and we descended, and that, for whatever reason, stopped it. I don't know why, but all of a sudden it just held there, and we were good the whole rest of the way, and we let the evaluators sleep in the bunk. But we had Pete Lear too, who we sanity checked everything. I don't see my evaluator in here if he's got anything to add, but Brayden's in here.
I'll say I also like using the IFG when somebody showed that to me. It's a summary of how to use the charts as well as an example from Hawaii to the US using that 46.5 go-to number. And that helped me understand how it all works.
And the Hickam to Guam one's a really conservative one because you do fly, if you're going there, you do fly directly over Wake. I mean, whether it's open or not, if you got an emergency, you could drop in there if you got the weather and you plan that ahead of time. But yeah, worst case, that's the longest one. But I've seen a lot of people do the Hickam to Travis because there's nothing in between here and there. But in between Guam and Hawaii, you do have Wake if you absolutely need it.
Got it. Yeah, that definitely makes sense to me. Like that's more a true ETP scenario. Do you have different numbers that you use for yourself, like as a quick check when you get out to the plane?
So it should be fully service leaving Travis, and usually it's Travis to Hickam. But if you had that issue, kind of like we had going to McCord, then it's a different story because you're down to 75. I like the 45 one for about 3 hours because crossing the Atlantic, that's about, you won't be too far out of the way there. You've got like Gander and all that and Prestwick, and you're not really more than 3 hours from anywhere. Hickam is, I think, the worst case one, and that 45 WAG tends to be about right. But yeah, if you've got bad weather along the way and you can't get into Wake for whatever reason, then that one's going to be a lot different.
Ever needed more than 46.5?
I haven't, but that doesn't mean that, you wouldn't depending on where you're going. But I think, yeah, you're right. Hickam to Guam would be the one where if for whatever reason Wake was just not an option, then you would need more.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I also saw, Heather, thank you for that technique, the 12 o'clock position on both readouts. That's a good one too. I don't have like a whole lot more to add to it related to this. I don't want to hold people too much longer unless there are other announcements to make. Sorry, I couldn't hear it either. It was broken for me. Well,